They're going to win. They're going to win big. And a defeat in that building behind me, the Royal Courts of Justice, will cost Harry millions. Millions that he hasn't got.
The case is now officially wrapped up. The evidence has been laid out, every angle examined, and the pressure is fully on the judge, Mr. Justice Nicken, who is now preparing his final decision. He's taking time over the Easter period to focus completely on this, because what he's dealing with is anything but simple. After 11 intense weeks, the record in front of him is layered, messy, and at times completely unpredictable, filled with mixed signals, emotional moments, and conflicting accounts that have kept everyone watching closely. We're talking about flirty messages that raised eyebrows, a key witness suddenly pulling back on his own earlier claims, and a royal editor pushing back hard, calling the allegations nothing more than fiction. On top of that, there were emotional scenes in court, visible tension, even disagreements involving the judge, and testimony from a former Daily Mail editor who admitted the process pushed him to the edge during long, exhausting nights. This wasn't a calm or straightforward case. It was intense from start to finish. Now, behind the scenes, people close to the situation say the Daily Mail's legal team is feeling confident about how things could turn out. Not guaranteed. Nothing ever is in cases like this, but that confidence is being described as strong and growing. And if that confidence holds up, the impact on Harry could be serious, especially financially. We're talking about the possibility of millions in legal costs and damages, a situation that could quickly become overwhelming. But it doesn't stop there. The reputational side could hit just as hard. If the final judgment questions the reliability of his testimony or suggests the case wasn't as solid as presented, that would create major fallout for his public image.
If Harry loses, which the Mail think he will, it will further damage his reputation, it will erode any remaining credibility that he may have, and it will clean him out financially, which, be clear, will place further pressure on that crumbling marriage.
It would be one of the toughest moments he's faced since stepping into a more public role outside royal life. And then there's the bigger picture. This case wasn't just about one dispute. It tied into a wider narrative that has been building for years. If the outcome doesn't go his way, especially with details like the Charlotte Griffith messages and the Gavin Burroughs situation already out in the open, it could shake that entire narrative in a major way. Now, looking at one key part of the case, the Charlotte Griffith situation stands out. Harry told the court he met her once, realized the next day she was a journalist, addressed it with a friend, and moved on. But with everything else now being examined under a microscope, even moments like that are getting a second look. According to Harry, there was no further contact after that one meeting. But the Facebook messages that later came out tell a very different story. They show ongoing communication over several months, and not just casual talk either. The tone was warm, clearly friendly, even slightly flirtatious at times, with mentions of movie nights, shared jokes, and even a nickname between them. There were also messages about social events and moments where Harry himself shared his phone number, which adds another layer to how close this interaction actually was. One detail that really caught attention was a message about making polite conversation at a dinner while asking guests for charity donations. When that was lined up with official records, it appeared to match a specific event, a Centerpoint dinner hosted at Clarence's house back in December 2011. That connection made the timeline feel a lot more grounded and harder to dismiss as coincidence. Now, Griffith's own testimony brought a completely different kind of weight to the situation. She told the court that through her social connections, she became aware that Princess Catherine was expecting her first child days.
There's now a very real possibility that Harry is going to lose this case because he's made a claim about Charlotte Griffith and the nature of their friendship, and then the messages tell a different story.
Before the public announcement was made, that kind of information would normally be huge for any journalist, a major headline moment, but she chose not to publish it. Instead, she held back, drawing a firm line between her professional work and her private relationships. That decision spoke volumes. It showed restraint, loyalty, and a clear understanding of boundaries, something that stood out in a case full of conflicting claims. It also suggested that she could be trusted with sensitive information, which made the idea that she was somehow unsafe or untrustworthy as a social contact seem much harder to accept. However, Harry's legal team reportedly pushed back hard on this point. They suggested that Griffith may have exaggerated or even created that story about Catherine's pregnancy, framing it as part of a larger pattern of overstating her connections to the royal circle. That's a serious claim to make about a journalist with years of experience covering the royal family. Griffith firmly rejected that suggestion, and if the judge ultimately decides that her account was truthful, then that allegation alone could significantly weaken Harry's overall position in the case. But the situation involving Gavin Burroughs may have had an even bigger impact. He was introduced as a key witness, someone expected to support claims about how information had been gathered. The expectation was that his testimony would help establish that certain methods used were not appropriate. Instead, what happened in court took a sharp turn. Burroughs stated that the statement being presented under his name didn't match what he recognized. He said he had no involvement in creating it, questioned the signature, and made it clear that it did not reflect his own words. He even explained that he only became aware of this statement much later through media coverage, which raised serious concerns about how that piece of evidence came into the case.
In around 2011, after a party with Charlotte Griffiths, Harry claims that he cut off all contact with her when he discovered that she was a journalist.
In any legal setting, a moment like that is huge. When a central witness distances themselves from a key document, it doesn't just raise questions, it shakes the foundation of that part of the argument. And in this case, where that testimony was meant to support a major claim, the impact could be significant depending on how the judge views it. Now, everything comes down to how these pieces are evaluated. The judge isn't working with absolute certainty, but with the balance of probabilities, meaning he has to decide what is more likely to be true based on the evidence presented. That standard still requires a clear and convincing narrative across each of the 14 articles being challenged. On the other side, the Daily Mail has consistently argued that the information in those articles came from legitimate sources. Their position is that details were shared by individuals within Harry's own social circle, not gathered through questionable methods. And if that explanation is accepted, then the claim that the information was obtained improperly would not hold up. Finally, testimony from respected figures like Rebecca English directly addressed the claims being made, adding yet another layer to a case that is already packed with tension, contradictions, and high-stakes consequences. Rebecca English found herself at the center of one of the more serious claims in this case. She was accused of obtaining details about Harry's past relationship with Chelsea Davy through improper methods, including an allegation that someone had been placed near Chelsea on a flight to listen in on conversations. That's a major accusation, and English pushed back strongly. She described it as completely wrong and deeply offensive, making it clear she would never even consider doing something like that. Not then, and not now. She also pointed out a key issue with the supposed evidence. An email was presented, but according to her, there was no reply.
And she said, I draw a line between my professional and my own personal life as compared to my attending events as a journalist. She said the fact that Catherine was pregnant with her first child would have been big news.
No confirmation, nothing that tied her to it in any real way. She emphasized that she had never even seen that message before, raising serious doubts about how reliable that piece of evidence actually was. Then came Paul Dacre, the former editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail, and his testimony brought serious intensity into the courtroom. This is someone with decades of experience, known for being direct and not holding back. And he did exactly that. He described the claims being made as extremely serious, but also at times completely unreasonable. He said the situation left him shocked and deeply frustrated, even admitting that during late-night moments, the stress of it all pushed him into visible anger. He made it clear that he felt strongly on behalf of his team, defending their work and their reputation. His reaction wasn't subtle, it was forceful, emotional, and impossible to ignore. On the other side, Harry presented a very different perspective. He described the situation as something that had followed him for years, a constant feeling that his private life was being watched, tracked, and turned into headlines. He spoke about the pressure it created, saying it affected his relationships and made him question the people around him, even those he trusted the most. His testimony carried a lot of emotion. There were moments where he appeared overwhelmed, close to tears, and other moments where tension rose in the courtroom. At one point, the exchange became intense enough that the judge had to step in and remind him to stay focused on answering the questions instead of turning it into an argument. That kind of moment doesn't automatically decide anything, but it does stand out. When a judge has to step in like that, it becomes part of the overall impression being formed during the case, something that can't just be ignored when everything is being carefully evaluated.
At times on the verge of tears, at times losing his temper, demonstrating that I think he's not right in his head, right? I think he's lost his mind.
And then there's the bigger contrast that has been discussed throughout the proceedings. Harry's case centers on the idea that his private life was used and exposed in ways that crossed a line. But at the same time, he has also shared very personal details about his own life through books, interviews, and major media projects that reached a global audience. That contrast doesn't automatically cancel out his claims. It's still possible for someone to choose what they share while also expecting certain boundaries to be respected. But from a public perspective, it does create a complicated picture, one that adds another layer to how everything is being viewed. Now everything is moving toward the final decision. The judge will go through each of the 14 articles one by one, assessing the evidence carefully and deciding what is more likely to be accurate based on what was presented. This won't be a simple yes or no outcome. Each part will be examined separately, and the full picture will only become clear once all those pieces are put together. One of the biggest factors will be credibility. The situations involving Charlotte Griffith, the issues surrounding Gavin Burroughs, and Harry's own performance in the witness box all play into that. These are the details that the judge will weigh, whether directly mentioned or reflected in the final reasoning. Right now, the Daily Mail appears confident in its position. Harry, on the other hand, is waiting for the outcome, and the judge is taking his time, working through everything carefully over the holiday period. No matter how it ends, these 11 weeks have already left a lasting mark. The case brought out messages, testimonies, disagreements, and moments of tension that are now part of the public record. It wasn't just one moment that defined it, it was the buildup of everything that unfolded inside the courtroom. Details were examined, statements were challenged, and at one point, even a key piece of testimony was called into question by the person it was linked to. There were emotional exchanges, strong reactions, and moments where the judge had to step in to keep things on track.
Was he drinking too much? Does he drink too much? I mean, I will say that I think Harry's very out of shape. If I look at him now, I wonder about his lifestyle.
Now the final decision is getting closer, and when it arrives, it won't just answer who came out on top, it will also shape how this entire situation is viewed moving forward. The question of whether this legal battle achieved what it set out to do will finally have a clearer answer, based not on speculation, but on the judgment itself. Let's break down the legal structure behind this case, because once you understand how it works, everything starts to make a lot more sense. This isn't a criminal case, it's a civil one, and it focuses on something called misuse of private information. That means the judge isn't deciding guilt or innocence, but instead weighing up whether certain boundaries were crossed. The entire framework comes from laws that developed in the UK after the Human Rights Act came into effect in 1998. At the center of it are two competing rights that have to be carefully balanced. On one side, there's the right to privacy, and on the other, the right to freedom of expression. Both matter, and the court has to decide where the line should be drawn in this specific situation. Now, for a claim like this to succeed, two key things need to be proven. First, the information in question must actually be private, meaning a reasonable person would expect it to stay out of the public eye. Second, and this is where things get more complicated, it must be shown that the information was obtained through methods that weren't acceptable, rather than through normal journalistic practices. On that first point, there is some ground to stand on. Details about personal relationships, private conversations, and specific movements are things most people would consider personal. Just because someone is well known doesn't automatically make every part of their life open for public discussion. That part of the argument has some weight. But the second part is where the real challenge begins. The case is built around claims that certain information was gathered using methods that cross legal boundaries.
This indulgent crybaby, the world's least happy millionaire, and it's rubbed off on him, and now he's furious and bitter and hates the world. Poor old David Sherborne's going to need a detox after 10 weeks with the H-bomb, isn't he?
Including things like unauthorized access or deceptive practices. And for the claim to succeed, the judge has to be convinced that this actually happened in relation to the specific articles being challenged. This is exactly where the Gavin Burroughs situation becomes so important. He was expected to provide key support for the argument about how information was gathered. But when he stepped back from the statement linked to him and questioned its authenticity, that created a major gap in the case. It removed what could have been a central piece of supporting material, At the same time, there's an alternative explanation being presented. The argument is that the information didn't come from questionable methods at all, but instead from people within Harry's own circle. Friends, acquaintances, and individuals present at the same events can and do speak to journalists, and that's something that happens regularly in high-profile social environments. From the outside, that kind of information can look like it came from monitoring or tracking, but in reality, it can simply come from people choosing to share what they know. And, interestingly, even Harry himself acknowledged that he had concerns about this, saying he sometimes suspected those close to him could have been the source of certain details. If that explanation is accepted, then the foundation of the claim becomes much harder to support, because if the information came from willing sources, then the argument that it was obtained through unacceptable methods loses strength. Now, another key detail is that this case isn't about one single article. There are 14 separate pieces being examined, and each one has to be looked at individually. That means the outcome could be mixed, with some decisions going one way and others going another. There has even been discussion that the judge could take a balanced approach, ruling differently across the articles to reflect the strength of the evidence in each case. That kind of outcome wouldn't be unusual in a situation this complex.
It's in the book. Es ist im Buch, man kann es lesen. Dahin. Es ist drin. Im Buch. Auf die Treppe schnell!
But overall, based on how things have unfolded, many observers believe the current direction is not particularly strong for Harry. The questions raised around Charlotte Griffith, the issues involving Gavin Burroughs, the strong responses from figures like Paul Dacre, and the firm denial from Rebecca English have all shaped the overall picture in a significant way. And beyond just this case, there's a bigger impact to consider. Situations like this don't exist in isolation. Past events, including major media controversies and public inquiries, have already changed how the press operates and how these cases are handled. Those developments led to stricter expectations, clearer boundaries, and new legal standards that influence how courts approach privacy claims today. So whatever the final outcome is here, it won't just affect the individuals involved. It will also play a role in shaping how similar cases are viewed moving forward. That's why this moment feels so important. It's not just about one legal battle, it's about where the line is drawn between privacy and public interest in a world where that line keeps getting tested again and again. This case wasn't just presented as a personal legal battle. It was also framed as part of a bigger mission. The idea was that by taking the Daily Mail to court, Harry was trying to push for greater accountability in the media world, especially when it comes to how stories about public figures are gathered and reported. That was a major part of the narrative surrounding this entire situation. But here's where things take a serious turn. If the case doesn't succeed, if the judge decides that the evidence doesn't prove those claims about improper methods, then the outcome flips completely. Instead of strengthening that argument, it could actually weaken it. A high-profile case like this, backed by strong legal teams and lasting over 11 weeks, carries weight. And if it doesn't establish what it set out to prove, that sends a powerful message in the opposite direction.
And the whole thing goes nuts. And it's interesting because talking about going nuts, Harry lost control to such an extent where he's not just blabbing on the verge of tears about how Meghan's life has been made a misery. I think you'll find that everything that happened to Harry and Meghan is self-inflicted. It's the choices that they've made.
That's why this case matters far beyond just one person. If the Daily Mail comes out on top on the core claims, it becomes a major moment in the ongoing relationship between public figures, the press, and the legal system. Not a blanket statement about everything that has ever happened in the media world, but a clear statement about this specific case, these specific claims, and how they were evaluated in court. Then there's the financial side, and this is where things get very real. In UK civil cases, the losing side often has to cover a large portion of the other side's legal costs. And after 11 weeks of proceedings, those costs are huge. We're talking about millions just in legal fees alone. If Harry ends up responsible for a significant share of that, on top of his own expenses, the total impact could be massive. There's even been talk about how those costs could be handled, with speculation around assets and financial flexibility. But the reality is, no one fully knows the exact situation behind the scenes. What is clear is that this case has already required a major investment of time, money, and energy, and a negative outcome would only add to that pressure. And this is exactly why many people originally advised against taking this route. There's a long-standing understanding that legal battles with major media organizations come with serious risks. The process itself can be exposing, bringing private details into public view, And once that happens, there's no reversing it. Those warnings weren't random. They came from people who understood how these cases unfold, how evidence gets examined, and how unpredictable outcomes can be. But despite all that, Harry moved forward, confident in his position and expecting the evidence to support his claims. What followed?
Why Harry doesn't like Charlotte Griffiths. It's because she drops so many truth bombs about him. And she drops so many truth bombs about Meg.
Was a process that didn't unfold the way it may have been expected. Moments like the Charlotte Griffith messages coming into focus, the situation involving Gavin Burroughs, the judge stepping in. During testimony, and strong reactions from key figures all added unexpected layers to the case. Now, none of that automatically decides the final result. Legal cases can still take surprising turns, and it's entirely possible that some parts of the claim could succeed while others do not. The Daily Mail's confidence is strong, but it's not a guarantee. Still, it's clear that the path of this case has been more complicated than initially anticipated. And no matter what the final judgment says, the record that has already been created tells its own story. A story about relationships, testimony, challenges, and the way everything played out inside the courtroom. This wasn't the version of events Harry likely hoped would dominate the public conversation. But once a case reaches this level of exposure, every detail becomes part of the narrative. The judge is now working through all of it, and the decision is getting closer. When it finally arrives, it will bring a formal conclusion to this legal battle. Whether that conclusion aligns with what Harry set out to achieve or takes a very different direction is something everyone is waiting to see. And beyond all the legal arguments, there's also a human side to this that can't be ignored. This case didn't come out of nowhere. It's rooted in personal experiences, in a life lived under constant public attention, where privacy has always been difficult to maintain. Growing up in that kind of environment leaves a mark. When personal moments, relationships, and everyday movements become headlines, it shapes how someone sees the world around them. It creates frustration, pressure, and a desire to push back against it. Those feelings are real. The experiences behind them are real, and while the court focuses on evidence and legal standards, that human element remains part of the bigger picture that brought this case to where it is today. The drive behind all of this is real, and it matters. The need to push back, to demand accountability from institutions he believes crossed the line. That didn't come from nowhere. It's rooted in years of experience, frustration, and a belief that something needed to change. That part of the story can't just be dismissed. But here's where the situation turns heavy. There's a clear gap between what Harry set out to achieve and what this process has actually delivered. He went into court aiming to prove that certain actions crossed legal boundaries, hoping for a clear acknowledgement of that. Instead, what unfolded was something very different. The courtroom became a place where his own actions, his own credibility, and even private messages from years ago were brought into the spotlight. That's the reality of legal battles like this. It doesn't just examine one side, it puts everything under pressure, every claim, every detail, every piece of evidence. He stepped forward to challenge the press, but in doing so, he also placed himself under the same level of scrutiny. And that's not because the system is against him or because one side holds all the power. It's because that's how these cases work. Once it starts, everything gets examined, nothing stays hidden. This is exactly why many people warn against taking these kinds of legal paths. Not because they want to protect the press, but because they understand how intense and exposing the process can be. It opens doors that can't be closed again once the information is out. Looking at how everything unfolded, it's clear that the case didn't play out the way it may have been expected. The strength of the arguments was tested from every angle, and the risks that come with this kind of legal action became very real as the weeks went on. Now the big question is, what comes next? After 11 weeks of pressure, testimony, and intense examination, does this experience change anything moving forward? Or does the bigger mission continue regardless of the outcome? Recent public appearances suggest that the broader message is still moving forward, that the focus hasn't shifted, but the court case itself is reaching its final stage, and the decision will bring clarity to at least this chapter. And beyond the headlines, beyond the public statements, the real decisions will happen in private, away from cameras, away from attention, in quiet moments where the next steps are carefully considered. Those are the choices that will shape what happens next. There are multiple factors at play here: the outcome of the case, the financial impact, the public response, and ongoing personal challenges all come together in a way that makes the next move incredibly important. Right now, the judge is still working through everything, carefully reviewing the details before delivering the final decision. Harry is waiting, like everyone else, for that moment to arrive. And no matter what the result is, the experience itself has already left a mark. The time, the exposure, the pressure, all of it becomes part of the bigger story. The decision is coming soon. And when it does, it won't just close this case, it will set the tone for everything that follows. The legal questions will be answered, but the public conversation will keep going, shaped by how people interpret everything that's happened. At the end of the day, the final ruling will come from the judge, but the long-term impact will be decided over time. And Harry, wherever he is when that moment hits, will have to decide what direction he takes next, based on everything that's unfolded. So now it's your turn. What do you think this outcome will be? And was this legal battle worth it in the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you made it this far, and don't forget to subscribe and share this with others following the story. Appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.